Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Lana Del Rey, titled Honeymoon. But I bet there's a slew of you who are wondering why I'm even bothering to do this review. I mean, it's not like I haven't made my opinion on Lana Del Rey pretty damn clear by this point, so why the hell am I even bothering to cover her? Well, believe it or not, I actually have a certain fascination with Lana Del Rey, at least academically in terms of her somehow still increasing popularity. I mean, I got it at first, I understood it. Video games, it's an excellent song, and I can even see it making sense into Born to Die. I mean, sure, the writing was melodramatic as hell, I didn't care much at all for Lana's delivery, but at least the production had a veneer of glamour and bombast that made songs like National Anthem very workable. But then 2014's Ultraviolence happened with the Black Keys' Dan Auerbach behind the production boards, an attempt to emphasize more of a bluesy, reverb, swallowed up, faded sound, and the veneer torn away. It didn't have the grandiose bombast to make compelling melodrama, and the writing rapidly became insufferable, as Lana tried without fail to romanticize or glamorize her terrible behavior, bad situations, and seeming inability to do anything to change them without an ounce of self-awareness or higher commentary. And sure, you could argue that's a character she's playing, and this is what Hollywood has made her, but the writing and the framing and some of the insight doesn't really support that. And it's not as if it made the music any less tiresome or drab to any subversive thrill to the regressive cliches and stereotypes she put on display. On top of that, she chose to abandon more of her soulful lower range for this high baby voice cooing slur that, when it wasn't getting overwhelmed and swamped out by the mix, failed to raise any sort of emotional response in me whatsoever. One of the big reasons why that album kind of sucked in my eyes. And you would have think that more people would have picked up on that, but it seemed like critics and audiences alike were enraptured by that album, and Lana Del Rey got bigger than ever, even finding her perfect male counterpart in The Weeknd and his shameless brand of hedonistic exploitation. But you know what? Say what you will about The Weeknd, at least he knew enough to bring some visceral punch and energy to his melodramas, whereas with Lana, well, maybe it's just everyone already knowing my preferences here, but I already got a lot less requests for Honeymoon than I did for Ultraviolence, and I'll admit that I was interested by that. I mean, sure, singles like High by the Beach annoyed the hell out of me, but I did notice there were fewer producers than ever behind this album, with Lana handling even more of the production herself. So, okay, with more artistic control than ever before, what does Lana Del Rey deliver with Honeymoon? Well, it's better than Ultraviolence, but I think that's more because that album just pissed me off, where Honeymoon barely raises any emotions in me at all, at least at first. I can acknowledge that there are some scattered improvements pretty much across the board, almost to the point where I get the feeling that Lana actually managed to drive up some solid melodrama until the very end of this album, where she managed to piss the majority of it away. And just like Ultraviolence, I'll admit right out of the gate, I'm not in the target audience for this album. I get that. But you know what? Even if I was, this still isn't any good, and for many of the exact same reasons her previous records didn't work. It might be a slight improvement, but that's not saying much. So let's start with Lana Del Rey herself. And look, you either like her monotone, half-slurred coo that blatantly appropriates vintage pop, or you don't like it. And for me, it mostly does nothing. It's not soulful or impassioned or raw. It's barely even sensual, because that would require Lana to sound like she gives a shit. And that only happens when she dips into her lower register, which, to her credit, she does a lot more on this album, and there are points where she sounds kind of sultry and approaches that noir femme fatale image which she finds so attractive. And as much as she drowns out this album in reverb, I will admit it does cover up some of the weaknesses in her upper range when her voice can start to crack and go off key. And sure, that definitely does happen on this album, but less than usual, and when it does happen, it can sound a little bit masked and it sounds a little better. And you know what? The positives keep coming, because the instrumentation has improved modestly as well. Sure, it's still as monochromatic and reverb choked as Ultraviolence, and I challenge you to remember any melody line in the instrumentation that isn't directly tied to a vocal line, but it seems like Lana was looking to find that medium between the perpetually faded Ultraviolence and the vintage glamour of Born to Die. And there are moments on this album where she does succeed here. I like that lower guitar she introduces on songs like Terrence Love You and God Knows I Tried, and especially on Religion, where she picks up a little bit more rumble courtesy of the thick, low percussion roiling below. And hell, the strings arrangements she uses for the title track and Art Deco, or the slight menace that creeps onto Music to Watch Boys to, or the Spanish Rollica 24, they do have some of that class in which she aspires to. In the best cases, we get songs like Salvatore, which might as well be trying to pull straight from a Godfather movie, with the lo-fi strings, echoing deep voices in the background, and the expansion across the second half of the song that's really quite potent. Or the darker groove that kicks into the Blackest Day, with a lurking guitar smolder, easily the best two songs on the album here. They're good tracks. But those are the moments where Lana Del Rey can keep things interesting, which is where we encounter the first major issue of this album. The majority of these songs run over 4.5 minutes, and most run out of instrumental ideas and progressions after the first 60 seconds. And given find that so much of this album is smothered in layers of reverb and a mix that almost seems to emphasize that humidity. It makes the record feel so turgid and slow and heavy that it easily feels longer than the hour that it runs. On top of that, a lack of top quality producers really does show, most notably in the synth tones and the horns. For as much as there's this gauze and humidity that Lana blankets this album with, the synths are often way too clean and clear to blend all that well, and the horns on tracks like 24 feel way too thin to back up that pomp and bombast. And that's where we get to tracks like High by the Beach and Freak, which are just a mess of bad mixing, oily synth loops, and on Freak, an attempt for sexuality that feels incredibly forced. Sorry, Lana, even if you tried to mimic Timbaland's vocal filters from Justin Timberlake's Sexy Back for the outro, you're not pulling it off. It's not that sexy at all. And now we gotta go to lyrics and themes. And before I start dissecting these at length, let's describe what we get on our 14 tracks. We get 5 songs about toxic relationships and some variety, no surprise there. 3 about melodramatic bitching about fame and the press, which I have no patience for, including a Nina Simone cover of Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood that Lana doesn't improve at all. 2 attempts at sex songs, the latter Religion ripping off some pretty obvious imagery from Madonna's Like a Prayer. 1 overly voyeuristic track that might have had some melodramatic thrill if Lana didn't immediately play it off like a bad game, and then the interlude featuring a good poem from T.S. Eliot that Lana can't really elevate beyond pretentious pseudo-spiritual musings on the nature of time that frankly I've seen before in most physics classes. On top of that, there's a tribute to Azealia Banks of all people on Art Deco, who Lana Del Rey counts as a friend, which is actually a little bit fascinating because read between the lines in that song and it could easily be read as a veiled comment that Azalea's inability to keep her mouth shut and let her music speak for herself instead of her Twitter might be the reason that she hasn't found more success. Honestly, I kind of like that Lana played the song with this little tact, because it's easily the sort of double-edged song that could easily spark up some real melodrama. And on the topic of melodrama, that's really the only way I get any sort of enjoyment out of this album, watching these lurid situations play out, and there's only 2 that really work. The first is Salvatore, which is really more because of the atmosphere than the writing, but it does capture that femme fatale Italian vibe as she dies in lurid mafioso debauchery. What gets more interesting is the second case on the Blackest night, where she discovers the man was cheating on her. She goes to enact her bloody revenge, and it's unclear whether or not she gets it. I mean, the Buddy Holly reference would imply that she's getting that death, but either way, it's melodramatic, and at least it shows her rising above the bad relationship she stayed in Ultraviolence and doing something. Hell, a song like Terrence Loves You shows her trying to recuperate from being dumped herself, and it's not a bad song. Although I definitely argue that Lana hasn't quite earned the right to openly steal some of David Bowie's most famous lines from Space Oddity. So, okay, but putting that aside, maybe we reached a point of emotional maturity? Has she progressed at all? Well, not quite. And it comes down to one song that I purposefully left out of my count. Swan Song. Lyrically, it's a track where Lana encourages her man to stop working so hard, put on his white tennis shoes, an Ayn Rand metaphor for avoiding work, and then she might even stop singing and they can go on to find eternity together, letting him take the lead. On the very surface level, this song kind of exasperates me because it's basically a song about inactivity for the idle rich. Some of us do have to work for a living, Lana, but okay. Even as pure escapism, it runs deeper than that, and it comes down to the framing. Beyond the Nina Simone cover, this is the album closing track, one of the most opulent songs, one of the most romantic songs, and it features Lana setting aside her artistic autonomy, her career, to submit to a guy. And for all the evidence on this album, there's no evidence that this guy is any better than any of the cliched or often abusive bad boys that Lana falls for time and time again. This is coming after an album where Lana confronts the rationale why she goes for bad boys, and maybe it has a breakthrough and yet ends with her returning to the exact same situation as before. And this swan song, this happy ever after, is framed as high romance. There's no subtle commentary here, and that's what pisses me off about Honeymoon. That's why the closing Nina Simone cover rings as just hollow excuses for Lana's bad behavior. The arc of this album shows Lana trying for introspection, and her solution to that, her personality and her behavior, might be the problem isn't so much to change, but just submit completely. She spends a fair amount of this album on her knees licking soft ice cream. Lana, I'd say blow me, but I'm not sure you'd take that as a metaphor. So you know what, in the end, Honeymoon is kind of better than Ultraviolence, if only because it actually can land a few moments of ridiculous melodrama, but that does not make it good. The instrumentation is tepid and drab and overlong, the performance is rarely engaging, the mix is swallowed up in its own dank humidity, the writing is overloaded with cliche when it isn't stealing from better songwriters, and the themes, they kind of make me feel a little ill. For me, it's a light 4 star out of 10 and no recommendation. And while I can rail against the underlying message of domestication that's feeding into the heads of an impressionable fan base, truth be told, it's too drawn out, pretentious, and lacking in momentum to really be gripping in ways even her previous albums were. Even would-be submissives masturbating to 50 Shades of Grey would find this album tedious, and that is saying something. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can't imagine how the comments section won't be just a joy to behold when we get down there later, so just keep it civil, guys. My opinion, I don't really understand if you like it, but try to explain to me why you do. That's something I really want to understand. But until then, if there's any other albums you want me to cover, or anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.